The cafe was almost empty by the time he noticed her. She sat near the window, where late afternoon light pressed itself against the glass and spilled across her table. It softened the lines of her face, tracing the curve of her cheek in a way that made her seem both near and untouchable. She stirred her coffee without drinking it, as if waiting for something, or someone, to happen. He hadn't meant to stare, not really. But when she looked up, her eyes met his, and the rest of the cafe dimmed. It wasn't just that she was older, it was that she carried time differently. In the stillness between them, he felt the weight of it, years she'd lived, choices she might have regretted, the quiet grace of someone who no longer rushed to fill silence. He tried to look away first. He didn't. She gave a faint, almost knowing smile. He couldn't tell if it was an invitation or a warning. When he finally stood, the sound of his chair scraping the floor was too loud. He walked to the counter, pretending to need another napkin, pretending not to feel her gaze flicker toward him again. The air between them had changed, something invisible now humming through it. He told himself he wouldn't speak to her. He told himself again and again. And yet, when he passed her table, his sleeve brushed against hers. Just fabric against fabric, nothing deliberate, but it made his breath catch. She didn't pull away. She glanced at the touch, then back at him, her eyes steady but softer now, like she'd remembered something she wasn't supposed to. "Sorry," he said quickly. She shook her head. "No harm done." Her voice, low, textured, a little tired, lingered in his chest longer than it should have. He stood there, not moving, aware of the faint trace of her perfume, something like rain and cedar. A few beats passed before he realized he was still blocking her light. "You look like you've been somewhere else," she said. He almost laughed, but didn't. "Maybe I was." Her lips curved, but not into a smile. "It's easier to stay there sometimes." He didn't know what to say to that. He wanted to ask what she meant, but her gaze had already drifted toward the window again. Outside, a bus rolled by, its reflection breaking across the glass like moving water. He lingered, torn between leaving and saying something that might keep her looking at him that way. I think I've seen you here before." "Probably." Her tone was gentle, not dismissive. "I come here when I don't want to go home yet." He nodded, even though he didn't fully understand. A silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but full, alive with the kind of stillness that made words feel clumsy. He could feel the warmth radiating from her arm beside him, the faint sound of her breath. He thought she might say something more, but she just looked down at her cup. The coffee had gone cold. He started to turn away, then she spoke again, almost under her breath. "You're too young to wait around in places like this." He met her eyes. "And you're too beautiful to sit alone." Something flickered there, regret maybe or surprise, but she didn't respond. For a moment, they just looked at each other, suspended in a silence neither dared to break. Then, from behind the counter, the barista called her name, a quiet reminder of reality cutting through whatever had started to form. She reached for her bag. "It was nice running into you," she said, though they'd never met before. He wanted to stop her, ask her name, say anything. But before he could, the door opened, spilling in the chill of evening air, and she was gone. The bell above the door jingled once, then went still. He hadn't meant to see her again, but the cafe had a way of pulling both of them back. It was 3 days later. She sat at the same table, hair slightly damp from the drizzle outside, tracing the rim of her cup with her thumb. He arrived unplanned, or so he told himself. He hesitated near the door, pretending to check his phone before walking in, pretending this was coincidence. When their eyes met, something softened in both of them, like an unspoken admission that neither had been able to stop thinking about that brief encounter. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "You can sit. It's not reserved." He smiled, trying to appear casual. "Lucky me." For a while, the conversation stayed safe: coffee, weather, work. But beneath every word was something else, something unsaid. The pauses between them were heavy with what they both refused to name. She mentioned she used to teach art. "I stopped a few years ago," she said, stirring her coffee though it didn't need it. Too many reasons. Not enough time. He could tell that wasn't the whole truth. You miss it, he said quietly. She looked at him, really looked this time. I miss who I was when I loved it. He nodded, not sure what to say. She had the kind of honesty that didn't invite pity. It demanded quiet understanding. It made his chest ache. When she asked about him, he fumbled. I used to play guitar. Not well. I stopped too. Why? He laughed softly. Because I didn't think anyone was listening. Her expression changed, almost imperceptibly, but he caught it. Someone should have been. The silence that followed felt alive. The sounds of clinking cups and soft music blurred behind them. He noticed the way her hand rested near his on the table, close enough that he could feel its warmth without touching. He wanted to reach for it, but she withdrew, curling her fingers around her cup as if to steady herself. You're very young, she said, voice low, like it was meant only for the space between them. You should be out there, not sitting here with someone who's already seen too much. And yet I'm here, he said. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. That's what worries me. Her tone carried something heavier, something that hinted at why this felt dangerous. Maybe it wasn't just the age, or the looks they might get. Maybe it was what it could awaken in her, the part of her that had been asleep for too long. He leaned back, watching her fingers tremble slightly as she reached for her napkin. You think I don't know what I want, he said quietly. She looked up, startled by the certainty in his voice. Do you? Not yet, he admitted. But I know I'll regret not finding out. For a moment neither moved. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you mean them. Her words hung there, tender and warning all at once. When they finally stood to leave, she brushed past him, her shoulder grazing his arm. The contact was brief, accidental maybe, but it lingered. He turned toward her, and for an instant she did the same, close enough that he could feel her breath near his neck. She didn't step back right away. Then she did, her voice barely above a whisper. Good night. He watched her walk away through the rain-slick street, his reflection fading in the glass between them, but the warmth of her nearness stayed, long after she was gone. The rain hadn't let up for days. It slicked the streets, drummed softly on the cafe awning, and filled the spaces between their words when they met again, this time not by chance. He found her sitting at the far corner, sketchbook open, a loose page half covered in charcoal strokes. She didn't notice him until he spoke her name. It slipped out too naturally, as if he'd said it 1,000 times before. She looked up, startled, then smiled. You remembered. I tried not to. That earned him a quiet laugh, one that caught in her throat before it fully formed. He took the seat across from her, the one that was never meant for him but somehow always waiting. For a while, they talked in half-sentences, her work, his classes, nothing dangerous. But the pauses came quicker now, the air between them thinner. Every movement felt charged, the brush of her sleeve against his, the way her hand lingered near his notebook when she reached for her cup. He could smell the faint trace of her perfume, warm, steady, like memory itself. She leaned forward to see his sketches, rough pencil lines on cheap paper. You draw, she said softly. Only when I can't say things out loud. Her gaze held his. Then you must draw a lot. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence that followed was full of everything they weren't ready to admit. A sudden sound broke through, the door opening, laughter spilling in from outside. One of her colleagues walked in, raincoat dripping. The woman waved. Lena! You're still here? Her posture changed instantly, shoulders straightening, smile too quick. Just finishing up, she said, closing the sketchbook. The warmth that had filled the air scattered like dust. He pretended to check his phone, feeling the distance return. The colleague ordered a drink and sat nearby. They couldn't talk now, not the way they had been. But even in silence, he felt her hands slide across the table, barely brushing his. A warning. A promise. Both. When her friend finally left, the quiet returned. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. You shouldn't be here when she is. I don't care who sees. She looked at him sharply. You should. There was guilt in her tone, fear threaded through restraint. He could see her trying to protect something, him, herself, the fragile space between them that couldn't survive too much light. You're worried what people will think, he said. I'm worried about what I'll do if I stop worrying, she whispered. Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, either breathed. Then she reached out, fingertips brushing the back of his hand, so gently it might have been accidental, if not for the way she hesitated afterward. He turned his hand, their fingers almost tangling. Almost. The bell above the door rang again. They froze. This time, no one entered. Just the wind. Her hand stayed there a second longer before she withdrew, eyes downcast. We should go, she said. He didn't move. If I do, he murmured, I might not come back. She met his eyes, caught between a smile and something close to fear. Then don't. Outside, the rain softened to a hush. Inside they stayed, too close, saying nothing, both aware that something had already begun they could no longer name or stop. He hadn't seen her in a week. No messages, no accidental meetings at the cafe. Just silence, thick enough to make him wonder if he'd imagined all of it. Until tonight. She was there again, but not in her usual spot. She sat near the back, alone, a glass of red wine untouched beside her. The light caught the silver in her hair, the soft tension in her shoulders. When she saw him, something shifted in her face, relief, maybe, followed by hesitation. You disappeared, he said, sliding into the chair across from her before she could protest. I thought that was for the best, she replied, eyes still on her glass. Was it? Her silence was answer enough. The cafe was closing soon, half the lights already dimmed. Outside, the street hummed faintly under the glow of wet pavement. He could hear her breath, steady, measured, like she was trying not to feel. I kept thinking, he began, that maybe I'd said something wrong. She looked at him then, her expression softening. No. You just said too much right. The words landed between them, fragile and irreversible. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. She met his gaze and didn't look away this time. Something in her had given up pretending. I shouldn't have come back here, she whispered. Then why did you? Her lips parted, but the words stayed inside. Instead, she reached out and brushed her thumb across the edge of his sleeve, just once, as if testing how real he was. Her hand lingered there, trembling slightly. I told myself it was nothing, she said. Just conversation. Just a boy who doesn't know better. I'm not a boy, he said quietly. She smiled, but it faltered. That's the problem. The air grew still. His heart thudded loud enough he was sure she could hear it. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't move. Her breath caught when his fingers grazed her skin, the warmth of her cheek lingering against his knuckles. This isn't fair, she murmured, closing her eyes. Then stop me. She didn't. For a long, suspended second they just sat there, his hand still near her face, her lips barely a breath away. The world outside seemed to fade, leaving only the rhythm of their breathing, the faint hum of electricity in the air. Then, her phone buzzed on the table. The sound shattered the moment. She jerked back slightly, staring at the screen lighting up with a name he couldn't see. Her pulse fluttered at her throat. I have to, she began, voice unsteady. He caught her hand before she could move. Don't go, he said. She froze, torn between reason and something far stronger. Their hands stayed joined, her pulse racing against his thumb. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. If I stay, I won't stop. The phone buzzed again, louder this time. Neither of them looked away. The screen went dark. And she didn't move. The cafe was closed tonight. They met somewhere quieter, a small studio she once used for art classes. The air smelled faintly of paint and dust, the ghosts of color clinging to the walls. A single lamp lit the room, its glow soft and golden, too intimate for what they pretended this was. She stood near the easel, tracing her fingers along an unfinished canvas. "I shouldn't have asked you here," she said. "You didn't," he replied. "You left the key under the mat." Her breath caught, half in surprise, half in something she didn't want to name. "You shouldn't have known that." "I remember everything you tell me," he said quietly. The words landed like confession. She turned, finally meeting his eyes, and something unguarded flashed there, fear, longing, both. "I thought I was protecting us," she said. "From people. From myself." "Protecting us from what?" She hesitated. "From what happens when people start talking." He frowned. "People already talk." She stepped closer, shaking her head. "No. You don't understand. My sister saw us that night, at the cafe. She told me I was reckless. That I was making the same mistake again." "Again?" The word lingered between them, heavier than the silence that followed. She turned away, pressing her hands against the easel. Her voice came out softer this time. "Years ago, when I was still teaching, there was someone. I told myself it was harmless. It wasn't. It cost me more than you can imagine." He moved closer, the floor creaking under his steps. "That's why you've been avoiding me. That's why I should keep doing it." He stopped just behind her. The space between them was a breath, maybe less. He could see the tremor in her shoulders, the way her hands tightened on the wooden frame. "But you didn't," he said. She closed her eyes. "No." When she turned around, he was right there. Her voice broke when she spoke again. "You make me forget how wrong this is." He reached up without thinking, his thumb brushing the corner of her jaw. Her pulse jumped under his touch. "Then maybe it isn't." She shook her head, but didn't move away. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because you believe it." Their eyes locked, the air between them crackling with something neither could stop. She took a shaky breath, stepping back. Only her heel caught on the edge of a stool, and he caught her before she fell. The moment froze there, her hands gripping his shoulders, his arms steady around her waist. Either of them spoke. Then she whispered, "Someone could see us." "There's no one here," he said. "That's not what I mean." Her words hung in the air like smoke, confession, warning, surrender all at once. He could feel her trembling, though whether from fear or wanting, he couldn't tell. Finally, she drew in a breath and stepped away. "You should go," she said, though her voice betrayed her. He didn't move. "Tell me you don't want this, and I will." She didn't answer. Her silence was the truth. He didn't go. The studio was quiet except for the rain whispering against the high windows. The lamp burned low, painting both of them in amber light that blurred the line between shadow and skin. She stood near the easel again, her back half turned, breathing too carefully, like one wrong movement might break everything that still held. "You should have left," she said softly. "I know." His voice was low, steady. "But I couldn't." She turned, arms folded, trying to create distance that didn't exist. "You think this is simple." "It isn't. I don't think anything about you is simple." That stopped her. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly, fighting herself. "You don't understand what you're asking for." "I'm not asking," he said, stepping closer. "I'm choosing." His words caught her off guard, and in that heartbeat of silence, something inside her cracked, the careful restraint she'd built piece by piece. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers, testing the space between permission and defiance. She didn't pull away. "I can't be what you think I am," she murmured. He moved closer still, until her breath warmed his collar. "You already are." Her laugh was a quiet tremor. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," he whispered. "But not tonight." Her gaze met his, steady, searching, and something shifted. All the fear, the guilt, the restraint she'd carried collapsed into the single truth either could keep down any longer. When his hand rose to her face, she leaned into it without meaning to, eyes closing as though that touch was something she'd been waiting years to remember. "You don't know what this will do to me," she said, her voice barely audible. "I think I do." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. It clung to his fingers. The air thickened with everything they hadn't said, her pulse, his breath, the weight of the moment pressing closer. His lips hovered a breath away, and she tilted her head just enough that he could feel the warmth of her whisper against his mouth. "This isn't the life I planned," she said. "Neither was I." The words broke whatever fragile rule had kept them apart. Her hand slid up his chest, trembling slightly, while his thumb traced the edge of her jaw. They stood suspended, too close to be strangers, too scared to be anything else. Every heartbeat stretched, every second a question. And then she stepped back, not far, just enough that the air cooled between them again. Her voice was unsteady but clear. "If I kiss you, I won't let go." He swallowed hard. "Then don't." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside grew louder, the wind rattling the windows. Her eyes glistened with something more than hesitation. Finally, she exhaled, shoulders dropping, the fight draining from her. "You should go," she whispered again, but this time, her hand stayed on his chest, not pushing him away. They stood there in silence, breathing the same air, knowing it had already happened in everything but name. And in that stillness, they finally understood, what bound them wasn't wrongness or rescue. It was recognition. The kind you couldn't unlearn. Morning light crept through the blinds, soft and golden, settling over the room like an unspoken promise. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, wet streets outside, the faint hum of the city waking up, and two people caught in the quiet aftermath of everything they'd almost lost. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hair still tousled, her sweater sliding off one shoulder. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, watching the rain ease into sunlight. Neither spoke at first. Words felt too small for what the night had done to them. Finally, she broke the silence. "You should hate me for this." He turned, meeting her eyes. "Do you?" Her lips curved faintly, tired but real. "I tried to. I told myself you were a mistake I hadn't made yet. And now?" She took a slow breath, crossing the distance between them. "Now I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." He smiled, just barely. "Good. Because I stopped pretending a long time ago." Her hand lifted, almost shyly, brushing a raindrop from his sleeve. The touch lingered, soft and searching. It wasn't hunger anymore, it was something quieter, something steadier. The kind of closeness that didn't need to prove itself. "You're not scared anymore," he said. "I am," she admitted. "But I don't want that to be the reason I walk away." He exhaled, relief slipping through him. "Then stay." The word landed gently, without demand, just an open space between them. She stepped into it, letting her forehead rest against his. For a long moment neither moved. The world outside kept turning, unaware of how everything inside this room had just begun to shift toward peace. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered. He smiled against her skin. "We don't have to. Just this." Her fingers found his, weaving together until there was no space left to fill. A warmth spread through her chest, part fear, part joy, part the strange comfort of finally stopping the fight she'd been waging against herself. They stayed like that, two people still figuring out how to breathe the same air without breaking it, until the light grew stronger, touching everything in gold. When she finally looked up at him, her voice was soft, steady, certain. "I think we'll be okay." He kissed her forehead, a quiet answer. "We already are." The city outside went on as usual, cars, chatter, the world returning to its rhythm, but inside, everything had changed. What began in hesitation had found its way to honesty. And for the first time, either of them wanted to hide.